The sound of the shattering glass didn't come from the dinner tables. It came from the very moment Olivia Whitmore, wrapped in a red dress sharp as a blade, twisted her voice through the air and tore apart whatever manners the room still had left, saying, "God, did no one teach you your place?" The words landed like a hammer strike, freezing the minds of everyone around her, stopping their hearts mid-beat, plunging the entire Whitmore estate ballroom into a strange glass cold silence, the kind that feels like a crystal about to crack. Even the chandeliers overhead seemed to tremble with the crowd's breath, scattering thousands of quivering reflections, like the eyes of guests pretending they hadn't just witnessed what happened. In the center of that storm, Maya Carter stood still, a deep green silhouette amid a sea of red gold and glitter. She didn't respond, didn't flinch, didn't bow her head. She simply stood there, steady as a stone cliff facing the wind. And it was that very stillness that made the room feel heavier, as if something unseen was shifting, slow but irreversible. Olivia smiled, the kind of smile edged like a saw, and turned her wrist so the diamond bracelet caught the light with intention. She stared down at Maya the way a queen might glare at someone she believed beneath her. "We're hosting this gala to raise money," Olivia said, her voice sweeter than honey, yet more toxic than acid. "Not to entertain misplaced staff." A laugh burst from a corner, then spread into small, muffled chuckles, trembling through champagne glasses. But as the laughter rippled outward, the ballroom itself seemed to contract like a creature curling in on its own spine. No one dared laugh too loudly. They were watching Maya, waiting to see if she would crumble or flee. Waiting to confirm that the hierarchy remained intact, that the Whitmores were still on their pedestal, and she, the woman of color in a simple green dress, remained at the edge of their picture of power. But Maya didn't move. Only her eyelids shifted in the smallest motion, subtle enough to be mistaken for a flicker of light. Then, without haste, she let her gaze travel across the room. It skimmed over faces, lowered to hide their hunger for scandal, over people pretending to adjust their clothes or clean their glasses to avoid being caught staring over hands, trembling on phone screens in fear of missing a viral moment. Finally, her gaze settled on Olivia. Not angry, not hateful, just a stillness so profound it made others uneasy. A deep red streak of spilled wine slid from Maya's wrist to the stone floor, landing with a soft click so small many thought they imagined it. But the sound was sharp as metal on rock, enough to slice through the laughter in the room. Olivia flinched, just slightly, but enough to mark the first crack in her polished mask of superiority. "Oh, don't look at me like that," Olivia said with a laugh louder than necessary, turning toward the crowd as if trying to reassert her throne. "Everyone knows these events. Always let a few volunteers slip in. And funny." Maya's voice cut through light but sharp, like someone snipping a taut thread. Every head turned. "I thought this was a fundraiser." Maya continued her voice, not loud, but clear enough for each word to fall like a bead of glass, not an audition for cruelty. No one breathed. A musician struck the wrong note, the piano stumbling in discomfort. An elderly couple jolted, glancing at each other as if they'd heard an old mansion crack in the night. Olivia froze for half a heartbeat, then forced a laugh, but the sound wavered brittle and unsure. "People like you?" She dragged out each word. "Should not people like me?" Maya repeated, tilting her head slightly. Her gaze no longer calm, but deep, direct, and dangerous. Interesting. The entire room felt pulled into a black hole. Time slowed, People could hear their own hearts. Olivia, sensing something slipping beyond her control, tried to push another line out, but her voice trembled just enough for the crowd to notice, and that was the moment they understood. Maya wasn't who they thought she was. Not staff, not a volunteer, not out of place. Unease swept through the ballroom like cold air crawling down a spine. A guest near the bar whispered, "Who is she?" and someone beside him answered, "Someone." Olivia better pray she didn't cross. No one knew what would happen next, but everyone felt it unmistakable and terrifying. Something had cracked, some balance had shifted, a storm had formed out of silence, and Maya Carter, standing at the center with an unnervingly calm gaze, was that storm. A storm without shouting, without proving, without asking permission. Just one moment. One look. One drop of wine hitting the stone floor, and the Hamptons' gala night was no longer the same. Another drop of wine slid off the rim of the glass and fell onto the marble floor, making a tiny click so small it seemed meaningless, yet sharp enough to slice through the atmosphere, stretched tight like a violin string. The entire ballroom, drowned in the cold shimmer of crystal light, suddenly felt its heartbeat quicken for reasons no one could explain. There are moments that do not need shouting threats or violence, only absolute stillness. And Maya Carter was standing at the center of that very stillness. Olivia Whitmore touched her diamond bracelet again, as if the reflected light could help her reclaim the authority that had just slipped from her grasp. She forced a smile, but the corners of her mouth trembled. "Well," Olivia said, her voice pitched higher than usual, a desperate attempt to rebuild the order. She felt cracking. "You have no apology to offer." Maya didn't respond. She only tilted her head, as though observing an interesting phenomenon, rather than a person attempting to provoke her. Her silence grew heavier, compressing the air until it felt like invisible hands were tightening around every throat in the room. A musician placed his hand on the piano keys, but didn't dare press down even once. A server carrying a silver tray stepped forward, his hands shaking so badly the glasses nearly toppled. Without any wasted motion, Maya simply reached out and caught the wobbling glass before it could fall. "Careful," she said, her voice soft as placing a leaf on water, yet somehow echoing through the entire room, pulling every gaze toward her. Fragile things break when people aren't paying attention. It wasn't a warning. It was a truth. A truth Olivia didn't understand, but the crowd felt it instantly. Olivia stepped forward, her high heels striking the floor like countdown ticks. Each step tried to project dominance, but her greatest weapon, her arrogant confidence, was eroding with every second passed. "You do not belong here," Olivia nearly hissed. "This is our world." Maya looked directly into Olivia's trembling eyes. "Your world," she repeated slowly, "seems smaller than I thought." A sharp breath sounded somewhere near the back. Someone pressed a hand to their chest, unsure whether from emotion or tension. Someone else turned away, afraid Maya's gaze might sweep across them and strip away every lie they were hiding behind their polished smiles. No one knew what was happening inside Maya's mind, but everyone sensed they had just watched an old boundary erase itself with a single sentence. Maya didn't attack. She simply stood there. But her presence was so powerful that Olivia took half a step back, subtle, yet enough for the crowd to realize the balance had shifted. "Oh, please," Olivia forced out her laugh. "Sharp but strangled. Don't act like you just did something meaningful. Everyone here knows Olivia couldn't finish the sentence, not because she lacked the words, but because the terrifying truth cracking open inside her. silenced her. She no longer knew which side of power she stood on. One of the oldest guests, a silver-haired man who carried himself with smug pride, whispered to his wife, "Who is she?" His wife didn't answer. She only gripped her glass so tightly her knuckles turned white. Phones were still raised, but the recording slowed. They were no longer hunting drama. They were trying to understand what their instincts were, screaming the woman in the green dress was not the victim. She was the center, the new gravity. Maya bent down to pick up a fallen napkin and wiped the wine off her wrist with movements as precise and steady as a surgeon preparing for a critical operation. No trembling, no rushed breath, and when she stood again in the eyes of many, she appeared taller, as if the room itself had shrunk around her. Grateful Maya said her voice, gentle enough for even the most timid person to hear. Such an interesting word. Olivia frowned. "What on earth are you talking about?" "I was only wondering," Maya replied. "People are only grateful when they receive something of value, aren't they?" The crowd murmured, partly because the line was too sharp, partly because it was true. Olivia flushed red, unable to form a coherent rebuttal. "What exactly did I receive here?" Maya continued, offering a small smile, the kind that wasn't mockery, but a cold truth spoken without apology. Not kindness, not respect. Only proof that sometimes old money is poorest where it matters most. Olivia opened her mouth, but no sound came out, and for the first time that night, the crowd stopped looking at Maya. They looked at Olivia. They saw the slight twitch in her eye, the pinch at her lips. And the truth laid bare, Olivia's power wasn't real. It had been built out of spotlights and the Whitmore name. Maya stepped forward, not toward Olivia, but toward the center light. "Everyone here," she said, her voice pouring through the room like water against stone. "Soft but unyielding is waiting for something." No one replied. No one dared move. "They want to see me fall," she said. "Or explode." A thin silence snapped across the space. Then Maya looked directly at Olivia, her gaze sharp, yet serene. "But I do neither." I remained standing. The room exhaled as if released from a spell. But the cruel truth was, the spell had only just begun. Because in that moment, no one realized, not even Olivia, that Maya Carter wasn't the woman who had walked into the wrong ballroom. She was the only person in that room who held the power to decide the future of the entire Whitmore empire. A storm was still forming, and that night in the ballroom of the Whitmore estate, everyone felt something they could not name. Maya's silence was not endurance, it was a warning. And tragically for Olivia, she was the only one who couldn't hear the thunder about to break. The night wind in the Hamptons still clung to the glass windows as the whispers in the ballroom finally faded, yet the question no one dared to voice had already begun to burrow into every gaze. Who was Maya Carter, and why was she not trembling before Olivia Whitmore? They did not understand that the answer began thousands of miles to the south in a narrow hallway of a wealthy high-rise in New Orleans, where a young black girl once sat curled between mops and chemical buckets. On long, echoing nights when the clock struck 9, her mother Denise Carter would open the janitor's closet and place a small paper bag of food into Maya's lap, offering a tired, aching smile. She would say, "Stay here, sweetheart. I'll be back after I finish scrubbing the 27th floor." And every time that closet door cracked open, laughter drifted down the hallway from the distant penthouse, crashing against the walls like waves, beautiful glittering and completely alien to them. That world did not belong to them. But that world taught Maya the two most important lessons of her life. Access can be bought, but respect never can. And the feeling of being looked down on is the strongest fuel a human mind can have. Maya learned then under flickering neon lights, while her mother polished marble floors, that the gap between worker and owner was not blood, but opportunity and choices. So when she turned 16 and stepped into an elite New Orleans high school on a scholarship, many white parents protested, but they never knew that the quiet girl they underestimated had a photographic memory, could read more than 600 words a minute, and solved equations faster than the teachers. By the age of 18, she earned a full-ride scholarship to the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, something even her former principal never imagined possible. But to Maya, it was not a miracle. It was the plan. It was the path she had seen since the days she sat by her mother's feet, watching those cleaning shoes move across icy marble floors. At the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, Maya built market prediction algorithms so accurate that professors insisted she join a special research program. By the age of 25, while many her age were still looking for work, Maya launched her own company, Helix Global Ventures, from her mother's small New Orleans kitchen, using 3 old laptops and a savings account, barely enough for a few months of Wi-Fi. What she had was not money, but a mind sharpened into stillness, the same quiet intensity that would one day make Olivia Whitmore tremble without understanding why. Over the next decade, Maya built Helix into a cross-industry empire: finance, clean energy, artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, global crisis forecasting. Her influence spread into Wall Street in a way no journalist could summarize, because she never allowed interviews. When the media reached for her, she stepped back. When they tried to put her on magazine covers, she declined. She knew true power is greatest not when it is seen, but when no one knows exactly where it stands. While Maya quietly built a world of her own, the Whitmore family lived in a gilded cage forged by their extravagant past. Olivia's father, Richard Whitmore, 65 years old, the pillar of the Whitmore empire, inherited real estate, luxury hotels, private investment funds, and outdated energy companies. To him, power came not from capability, but from position, not from innovation, but from the Whitmore name. Yet in the financial reports locked inside his safe, the truth unfolded page by page. Whitmore was drowning in debt assets, mortgaged investment portfolios, bleeding revenues collapsing, and a series of disastrous decisions placing the entire conglomerate on the brink of ruin. A centuries-old empire was hanging by a single thread, and that thread was named Helix Global Ventures. The $5 billion lifeline Richard desperately hoped for was not just capital. It was air, it was oxygen, the only thing keeping the Whitmore name alive on the global financial map. But the most terrifying truth was this: he had no idea that Maya Carter was the owner of Helix. He had met her once in a private meeting in Manhattan, but Maya had let her assistant sign the documents while she sat behind the table like a mid-level staffer. No logo, no business card, no announcement. And he, like many who lived high above others, hadn't bothered to look at her for more than 5 seconds. People often underestimate the quiet ones until they pay for that silence with consequences louder than any voice. That is why, when Maya arrived at tonight's gala, Olivia didn't recognize her. Neither did the crowd. They saw only a woman wearing nothing that symbolized surface-level power. No entourage, no jewels, no public relations team. They had no idea that this woman held a kind of authority that did not need light to exist, the power to pull everything away. money, status, reputation, with a single signature. And now, as Olivia humiliated Maya before the entire Hamptons elite, as her cruel laughter echoed beneath the chandeliers as she believed she was putting someone beneath her in their place, reality was bending in the opposite direction. No one in the room knew that Maya had not built Helix to avenge the world that once belittled her mother. She built it to prove that stillness is not weakness, it is strategy. But tonight, as the red streak of wine slid down her wrist onto the floor, Maya understood that her stillness was about to transform into another kind of power. Justice delivered through systems and mathematics, not rage. Tonight, in the Whitmore estate, no one realized they had insulted the woman holding the only breathing tube left for their entire family. They did not know that a few hours from now, everything would change color. And they certainly did not know that the past Maya carried the smell of cleaning chemicals. The sound of her mother's shoes on marble old books, long silent nights, was what made her stronger than anyone in that room, coated in gold and illusions of power. Because the strongest seed always grows from the hardest soil. And from tonight onward, that seed was about to break an entire forest. Night in Manhattan stretched out like a sheet of black velvet, the skyline glittering as it cast reflections across the East River. Yet inside Maya Carter's penthouse, everything was so silent, one could almost hear the clock dropping each second into the air. The room opened out toward the city, where the lights shimmered like a living map of power and ambition, but Maya's eyes weren't on the view. She was staring at the file before her, the $5 billion investment package the Whitmore conglomerate had been waiting for, over many long months, the lifeline that could keep them from collapsing the capital. She only needed to sign once more for it to be released by morning. But her hand did not grip the pen. It rested instead on the photograph beside the stack of documents, a photo she rarely let anyone see, her mother Denise Carter, wearing a beige housekeeper's uniform arms, wrapped around a stack of fresh linens, eyes exhausted, yet unwavering. The smile in that photo was nothing like those staged for glossy magazines. It was the smile of someone who had learned too much about life, endured too much of it, and still chose kindness. And tonight, after the humiliation at the Whitmore estate, that smile returned to Maya's mind with a clarity sharp enough to ache. She remembered how her mother had walked down those luxurious hallways with a slightly bowed back, though she had never bowed to anyone. She bowed only to the work that would one day send her daughter to college. Maya closed her eyes for a few seconds, inhaled deeply, then opened them again with a gaze honed like a freshly sharpened blade. Maya picked up the pen, but she did not sign the approval line. Instead, she wrote 2 words in black ink, the strokes straight, crisp, and final, cold enough to be felt, even without reading them, terminate deal. Not slowly, not shakily, not with hesitation, as though she had been waiting for this moment for years. And perhaps she had. 20 years of silent empire building, saved for one exact night, the night she withdrew a generosity that had been insulted. A soft knock sounded at the door. Lauren Mitchell Myers, Chief of Staff, stepped inside with careful steps. "Maya," she said, "we need final confirmation before the finance division proceeds. Whitmore is in immediate distress. If we pull out, we will." "Yes," Maya said, not needing Lauren to finish. "We will end them." Lauren said nothing, not because she was shocked, but because she knew Maya never made decisions from emotion. Maya always had a reason others could not see. "Effective the moment it's signed?" Lauren asked. Maya nodded. "No delays, no waiting for morning. Execute it now." Her voice was soft, almost gentle, yet that gentleness carried a force that tightened the air in the room. Lauren left, and 3 minutes later, in the soundproof operations floor below, filled with glowing screens, the Helix Tech Division received an emergency command: freeze everything now. The command encrypted and absolute shot through Helix servers at the speed of light through New York, through London, through Singapore, where advanced algorithms that had been resting quietly jolted awake like warriors summoned at midnight. Within 40 seconds, every liquidity channel connected to the Whitmore conglomerate was frozen, pending transactions blocked, reserve accounts locked, guarantee contracts revoked, auxiliary capital flows suspended mid-air. The Whitmore empire in exactly 1 minute was cut from the only lifeline it had left. Meanwhile, across Manhattan, the Whitmore chief financial officer sat in his office with a late glass of brandy, trying to convince himself that tomorrow would be their day of rebirth. Then the monitor flickered. 1 red error. Then 2. Then dozens cascading like rain. He squinted, thinking he must be drunk. He refreshed. Errors again. He tried the reserve accounts. Access denied. Impossible, he whispered, as his trembling hand hovered over the message: access terminated by Helix Global. His phone rang. His assistant screamed on the other end. "Sir, all offshore accounts are locked. The banks say the guarantees have been revoked. The system can't patch the breach." He shot to his feet. "No, we signed everything with them already." But his assistant answered with a voice breaking apart. "No, sir." They cancelled. Their CEO cancelled. Back in Maya's office, the scene was the opposite of chaos. No rushing, no panic. Only Maya standing by the window, looking at the city as if she were observing a chessboard she had arranged piece by piece long ago. Her phone vibrated. Lauren called back. "Maya, the system confirmed the command. Whitmore has lost all access. The charitable funds tied to them," Maya asked, "already rerouted to the Rose Initiative as you instructed." "Every cent. Good," Maya said. "Let those 5 billion finally do what they never did, help the deserving." She set the phone down. In that moment, the penthouse felt like a sanctum, not empty, but filled with the weight of an entire empire, collapsing on the other side of the city, with nothing more than the signature of the woman standing before the glass. Maya did not smile. She did not gloat. She spoke no triumphant words. She simply placed her hand once more on her mother's photograph, then whispered, "I've finished cleaning another room for you, Mama." Beyond the window, snow had begun to fall, light, slow, steady, as if the entire city were bowing its head to the decision, a decision delivered not through anger, but through the cold integrity of someone who had endured her whole life and now chose to rise with the only weapon true strength ever needs: deliberate silence. And at the Whitmore estate, where Olivia had just unknowingly shattered her own future, a storm unlike anything they had seen was forming. Not because Maya screamed, not because Maya sought revenge, but because Maya had just withdrawn the only thing keeping the Whitmore family standing: hope. And when hope disappears, the empire will fall, not with an explosion, but with the smallest sound, the stroke of a pen writing the word terminate. A soft sound, yet powerful enough to erase a family who once believed they stood above the world. Maya closed her eyes, and the Manhattan night drifted on, unaware that it had just witnessed the moment that would rewrite the history of an entire dynasty. While the city was still submerged in darkness, while the skyscrapers of Manhattan glittered as if coated in silver light on the 42nd floor of the Whitmore Group headquarters, a financial earthquake was beginning, and no one had the slightest idea what was happening. Brian Keller, the company's chief financial officer, stood at the window with a glass of brandy in his hand, trying to convince himself that tomorrow would be a day of salvation. He had spent months negotiating, persuading every division that the investment package from Helix Global would be the lifeline pulling the Whitmore dynasty back from the edge. But the glass had not even reached the table when the financial dashboard on his computer suddenly flickered. Access error. Brian frowned, thinking he had mistyped his password. He tried again. Error. He switched to the backup account. Still error. A chill ran down his spine. He opened the main control panel. A cascade of red codes blazed across the screen like wildfire. Access revoked funding. Terminated liquidity error. Account freeze alert. No. Impossible. He rubbed his eyes and hit the full system reset command, but the warnings kept flashing, pounding down like thunder inside the room. Probably a network glitch, he tried to reassure himself, though his hand shook so badly the brandy rippled in the glass. Then his phone rang violently, as if strangled. Sir, his assistant screamed through the speaker voice, cracking. All offshore accounts, every single one is locked. Banks in London are reporting emergency status. And the guarantee fund at Barclays just pulled its commitment. Brian blinked. Pulled back, impossible Helix already signed. Helix cancelled, sir, the assistant cried. Their CEO issued the order. At 1:14 a.m. New York time. Brian did not need a name. His body froze instantly. For a moment, he saw Olivia Whitmore in his mind. The red dress, the proud smile, the sweetness of her voice sharpened like a blade, and he understood what she had not yet realized: the Whitmore family had crossed the wrong person. Brian burst out of his office and slammed open the door to the financial operations room. What was usually a whirlwind of keyboard clicks had fallen silent as a graveyard. Employees stared at him with faces pale, as if they had just heard a death sentence. The automated trading algorithms just froze. Every account tied to Helix, one employee stammered. We can't access any liquidity channels. And the loans Brian asked, though he already knew. All recalled. Credit lines closed. Everything within 1 minute. He collapsed into a chair, the room spinning around him. No one knew Maya Carter, but they knew Helix Global, and they knew that Helix did not make technical mistakes. Every action executed by Helix was as precise as the pulse of an astronomical clock. When Helix froze something, it was not a glitch. It was intention. Panic spread outward from the Whitmore headquarters like a chain reaction. In London, traders discovered Whitmore's liquidity had evaporated in minutes. In Singapore, transactions involving Whitmore hung suspended like a massive ship run aground. In Zurich, banking partners called, repeatedly demanding answers no one at Whitmore could provide. And in New York, automated default alert algorithms began wailing across trading floors, prompting late-night analysts to murmur, "Something big is happening." But amid the chaos elsewhere, at the Whitmore estate, Olivia remained blissfully unaware that her entire life had just begun sliding downhill, fast, violently, and beyond recovery. And Richard Whitmore, asleep in his private suite, had no idea that a single order from a woman he once dismissed without a glance was severing the only breathing tube his family had left. Back in Manhattan, Brian Keller forced himself upright in the storm of the operations room. Get Helix on the line. Now he barked. A terrified staffer shook his head. We don't have a direct line. Everything goes through the gateway system, but they shut down all channels. The door was closed. Not a crack left open. No opportunity. No explanation. Exactly the way Maya had stood before Olivia at the gala, silent yet sharp enough to cut. Then the desk phone rang a piercing metallic sound, cold and hard, like steel striking stone. Brian snatched it up. Keller speaking. Mr. Keller. The voice was unfamiliar, a man speaking with the unsettling calm of someone who feared nothing. I am calling from Helix Global. We are contacting you to confirm that the withdrawal of funding has been formally approved. The CIO's decision is final. We can... Brian tried, but the voice cut him off. No. No negotiation, no extension, no reconsideration. And please note, this is not an error. This is a direct order. Brian heard a small click. The call ended. No apology, no explanation, no tone. Just an execution. A professional signal that the road had ended. When Brian lifted his head, the room around him seemed to have aged decades. Every employee had stopped typing and turned toward him with empty eyes. No one asked what happened anymore, because the answer was obvious. The Whitmore Group was no longer considered salvageable by any financial system. A young employee, eyes swimming with fear, whispered, "So what do we do now?" Sir Brian swallowed throat dry. He couldn't say pray. He couldn't say wait until morning. 30 years in finance had taught him to recognize the death of a corporation long before it appeared on paper. And now he could say only one thing, something even he couldn't believe he had to speak aloud. We have lost everything. Outside the window, Manhattan still glittered like a grand stage, where thousands of power plays unfolded at once. But no one that night knew the truth. The moment Helix executed the command to freeze everything, the power of the Whitmore family, a century-old empire, had begun to break. Not with an explosion, not with a scandal, but with the 2 words Maya had written in black ink, "Terminate deal." 2 words light as breath, heavy as a hammer, dropping on a dynasty that once believed it was untouchable. And in the silence of the Manhattan night, that chain reaction continued spreading with every passing second, like an underground wave ready to wipe everything away. Maya Carter said nothing, but her signature was forcing the entire financial world to hold its breath. Dawn in the Hamptons was usually radiant golden across the still surface of the lake, but this morning, that light pierced through the windows like a sentence being delivered. The Whitmore estate, once accustomed to the clinking of crystal glasses and the rhythmic tapping of high heels on marble floors, was now drowned in ringing phones, frantic footsteps, the panicked breaths of people who had just realized their world was collapsing without warning. Olivia Whitmore appeared in the main hallway, no longer in her proud red gown, but wrapped hastily in a silk robe. Mascara streaked down her cheeks, making her face look like a cracked fragment of a statue, once admired. She moved quickly, almost running, asking each housekeeper, "What's happening? Why are the phones ringing non-stop?" But no one answered. They bowed their heads. Their eyes no longer flattered her. They avoided her. The first sign of a shifting power balance. In the grand meeting room, Richard Whitmore stood at the table, staring down at his phone as if it were his own death notice. Notifications flashed relentlessly across the screen: liquidity collapse, warning funding terminated, bank recall, notice emergency audit triggered. He, the man who once controlled tens of billions with a single phone call, now shook like a junior analyst on his first day. The door burst open. Olivia rushed in. "Dad, what are the news channels talking about?" "They're saying Helix Global pulled all funding." Richard clenched his phone until his knuckles turned white. "Quiet." He barked, but the authority was gone. His voice cracked, it trembled, it feared. "We just need to call them. Explain again. Reassure them. Helix will." Then he stopped. The air froze. Because he understood that Helix was not the type of corporation that waited for people to explain. Before Olivia could react, a knock sounded 3 knocks, firm, deliberate like a judge striking a gavel to open court. When the door opened, 6 individuals in grey suits walked in. No noise, no bow, no smile. The legal team from Helix Global Ventures. Olivia froze. Richard straightened, trying to recover whatever dignity remained. "What kind of surprise is this?" he asked, attempting to maintain the calm tone of a man who once commanded financial councils. The lead attorney placed a black folder on the table. He did not sit. He did not wait to be offered a seat. He opened the folder, removed a stack of documents, and read in a voice, flat as machinery under directive, from Helix Global Ventures, as of 1:14 a.m. Today, all financial ties between Helix and Whitmore Group are terminated. All loans, guarantees, and liquidity supports are revoked immediately. All assets connected to Helix have been frozen under Clause 14B. Olivia gasped. "That's impossible. It is possible." The attorney replied, his voice soft enough to be terrifying. "And it has been executed." He nodded at his assistant. She connected her laptop to the projector. The screen lit up. The Helix logo appeared first, then a long list of offshore accounts, trust funds, investment portfolios, properties and shares, spanning New York, London, the Cayman Islands, all appeared on display. Each entry had one note beside it, frozen. Olivia released a strangled breath. They know about these accounts." She looked at Richard, trembling. The attorney answered instead, "Of course. Helix owns the financial firm that manages them." Olivia's face drained of color. Richard slammed his palm on the table. "We will sue. I'll call the attorneys." The Helix lawyer closed his folder and met his eyes. "You already called them. They cannot respond." "Why not? Because Helix Global purchased their retainer this morning." Richard opened his mouth, but no sound came. A blow to his pride, so clean and devastating he had never imagined it possible. Olivia gripped the edge of the table to steady herself. No, this can't. A conglomerate like Whitmore can't lose everything in one night." The attorney tapped the document, lightly pacing the verdict. According to the latest update at 6:42 a.m., the total debt of Whitmore Group now exceeds its total liquid assets by $5.1 billion. "What does that mean?" Olivia asked, sounding like a lost child. Richard swallowed his posture, collapsing like he had aged 10 years. But the Helix attorney answered for him. "It means this estate is no longer yours." A gasp rippled through the room. Olivia stumbled backward, clutching her robe. She had always believed herself untouchable, believed the Whitmore bloodline sat above all, believed every party, every insult, every cruel remark was just a way to reinforce their dominance in the world of the elite. But now 6 people in grey suits stood in her home like officials sent to inventory assets after a bankruptcy hearing. And all of it happened without a gunshot, without a scandal, without a rumor. Just 2 words. 2 words written in black ink by the woman she had publicly humiliated in front of hundreds the night before. Terminate deal. The room fell into an icy silence. And then, as if delivering the final cut of a blade in a bloodless execution, the Helix attorney spoke one last sentence, so quiet it could have been a prayer, yet sharp enough to carve through the air. The Whitmore Group didn't fall because of scandal. It didn't fall because of enemies. It fell because of consequence. As they walked out, Olivia collapsed into a chair, trembling uncontrollably, staring at the ballroom where flowers still carried their scent, where last night's wine still lingered in the air. And for the first time in her life, she understood what it meant for her world to be vast, to the point of delusion, and fragile, to the point of shame. Outside reporters were already gathering at the estate gates, news helicopters slicing across the morning sky. An era had ended, not with an explosion, but with the silence of the woman they once dismissed. A woman named Maya Carter. As the first rays of sunlight pierced through the clouds, signaling what should have been a peaceful morning in New York, the online world erupted like a torch flung into a warehouse of gasoline. In less than 6 hours after Helix's historic freeze, TikTok, Twitter, Reddit, and global financial news feeds were flooded with a single image: Olivia Whitmore laughing loudly at the gala wine glass in hand, while a black woman she had insulted stood silently beneath the crystal chandelier. And within minutes, users identified the woman. When the name Maya Carter appeared, the internet nearly exploded. A young TikToker shouted in a viral clip, "Oh my God, do you people understand? She wasn't staff. She is the CEO of Helix, the one who put $5 billion into the Whitmore Group." That video hit millions of views in 1 hour, and anyone who had watched Maya stand motionless under the lights the night before suddenly felt like they had missed the plot twist of the decade. The hashtag Silent Storm surged to global trending. A pinned comment read, "She didn't raise her voice. She raised the consequences." Financial analysts appeared on television with expressions they could not hide. A CNBC host said, stunned, "We are witnessing the collapse of an empire in a single night, caused by the heiress of that empire publicly insulting the investor holding their lifeline." Another expert added, "No, this is not about emotions." Maya Carter's Helix had flagged Whitmore's lack of transparency for years. Last night was simply the final drop, and Maya used the strongest tool available: absolute financial power. But the most explosive reactions had nothing to do with economics. They focused on the viral clip of Maya standing still, wiping the wine from her wrist. Millions rewatched that moment in slow motion, analyzing every tilt of her head, every glance, every tremble of Olivia's lips. A famous Twitter account wrote, "The way she wiped the wine, my God, that wasn't cleaning." That was the action of someone who knows she controls the entire board. Memes flooded the internet on one side, Olivia screaming on the other, Maya standing straight as an arrow. Caption: "When you think you're the thunder, but she's actually the storm." People who had worked with Maya began speaking publicly. An environmental researcher wrote on LinkedIn, "She once refused the chair position of a major organization because she believed reputation mattered less than building systems that actually uplifted communities." A former employee posted, "In 3 years working with Maya, I never heard her raise her voice. But every decision she made silenced a boardroom for 3 seconds. Then everyone knew exactly what to do." These weren't compliments. They were testimonies, painting a single truth. Maya was not silent because she was weak, but because she was strong enough not to need noise. Meanwhile, at the Whitmore estate, reporters swarmed the gate until it looked ready to snap off its hinges. News helicopters circled above their blades, thundering like war drums. Richard Whitmore stepped onto the balcony and shouted into a microphone, "The news is exaggerating. This is all a misunderstanding." But he was drowned out by reporters shouting, "Were you aware the woman your daughter insulted was the one approving the $5 billion investment into your conglomerate? Did Olivia trigger the collapse by offending Maya Carter at the gala last night? Helix confirms your assets are frozen. Do you have any comment? Richard staggered backward, overwhelmed, and in that single moment, the world saw something the Whitmore family had never shown true fear. Olivia, hiding behind a curtain, watched the viral gala footage with trembling hands. She tried to deny it, tried to convince herself the video was edited, manipulated, but it wasn't. Every word she had spoken, every gesture, every mocking smile, all captured, raw, undeniable, unfixable, unbuyable. A comment beneath the video made her break down. Last night she laughed. This morning her family's fate is no longer theirs to control. In contrast to the chaos, Maya Carter appeared nowhere. No statement, no post, no press release, no comment, no camera, no explanation. Her silence became a symbol. A YouTuber released a 20-minute analysis ending with "She doesn't need to speak." The world already understands, a veteran journalist said on MSNBC. In 30 years of reporting, I've never seen a power move executed with such elegance. No scandal, no shouting, no violence, just capital being redirected exactly where it belongs. But something else spread even more shockingly through insider channels. Maya did not keep the $5 billion. Leaked internal reports confirmed that the entire sum pulled from the Whitmore Group had been transferred immediately to the Rose Initiative, a global fund supporting Black women education startups, clean energy economic opportunity. People were stunned when Reuters published the headline, $5 billion reallocated within 7 minutes after Helix cancels transaction. A top comment read, "That's not revenge. That's redistribution." Another, "She didn't burn money. She planted seeds." The world began to understand Maya didn't just end an empire. She began a new era. And amid the global storm, while cameras swarmed the Whitmore estate and every news outlet raced to cover the most dramatic corporate collapse in recent history, Maya Carter, the woman who stood silently beneath the chandelier, did only one thing. She sat in her office reviewing grant files for a school in Detroit. Because to her, the fall of the Whitmore dynasty was not the center of the story. It was only the prologue of a much larger plan, rebalancing justice in a way that didn't require shouting, but still made the world turn its head. Maya did not seek revenge. Maya rebuilt, and the world was witnessing it in a way impossible to ignore. While the media storm was still tearing across the world, while the name Maya Carter appeared on every front page from New York to Johannesburg, inside the headquarters of Helix Global, a new era quietly opened, not with an explosion, but with the soft glow from a screen displaying the words, "Funds successfully reallocated to the Rose Initiative." $5 billion, a sum that only hours earlier had been the lifeline of the Whitmore Group, now flowed into an entirely different river, one Maya designed for those the system had long forgotten. The Rose Initiative, named after something her mother once told her, "A rose can grow through concrete as long as there is light." Today, that light was no metaphor. It was a $5 billion investment fund, a network of scholarships, training centers, seed capital for dreams that had never been given a chance to sprout. As the news spread, the website of the Rose Initiative crashed under the surge of traffic. Within hours, thousands of requests poured in from Detroit, Houston, Lagos, Nairobi, Jakarta. Long emails filled with determination, startup plans typed hurriedly on phones, pleas from single mothers trying to build futures for their children, all rushed in like floodwater reaching the end of a long, dry river. Maya read every application, every story, every fragile line of hope. She did not need cameras. She simply sat alone in her office, turning each page as though touching small, stubborn worlds refusing to die. All the noise outside the breaking news, the comment threads, the hashtags faded into a distant hum. In that room there was only one woman and countless lives waiting for a chance to rise. Then, one email made her pause longer than usual. A teacher in Atlanta requesting funding to build a small science lab for underprivileged students. The teacher wrote, "I just want them to touch the future instead of only reading about it in worn-out textbooks." Maya closed her eyes, seeing herself at 12 years old, sitting in a service hallway, arms wrapped around a torn book, her only doorway to a future she didn't yet know how to name. She approved the grant. Not only that, she doubled it. Not because the teacher asked for more, but because Maya understood exactly what those children needed. While Helix was executing the largest financial redistribution in history across the city, the Whitmore family was slowly drifting away from their own reflection. Asset inventory trucks lined up outside the estate. Workers in uniform listed every item, tagging each painting, every sofa, every antique vase. Things once called heritage were now labeled assets for liquidation. Olivia stood behind the window, palms pressed against the glass. No more tears, she had cried herself empty the night before. She watched the crystal chandelier, the symbol of power of the gala of her arrogance being removed. It swayed in the technician's hands, a cruel reminder. The object that once illuminated her laughter now illuminated her downfall. One inventory worker whispered to another, "They used to have everything." The colleague replied, "Not everything. If they did, they wouldn't have lost it, all over one sentence." Somehow that sentence reached Olivia. She shut her eyes, fingers whitening, as she gripped the window frame. For the first time she understood that power did not live in shouting, in gold, embossed invitations, in extravagant parties, but in how one treats the people they believe have nothing to offer in return. And Maya Carter had answered. Not with rage, not with violence, but with a new order justice rewritten through economics. Meanwhile, Maya and Lauren stood inside the Helix office, looking at a global map dotted with dozens of glowing points marking new projects. "The world is saying your name," Lauren said, pride warming her voice. "They're calling you the woman who shifted the balance of power from the ballroom to the server room." Maya didn't smile. "I didn't shift anything," she replied. "I only returned resources to where they belong." Lauren was quiet for a moment, then said softly, "And where they belong is with the people who were never seen." Maya nodded, her gaze deep and calm. Exactly. That afternoon, Maya traveled to Southside Chicago, where the Rose Initiative opened its first training center. No red carpet, no reporters, no VIP guests, just plastic chairs arranged in a circle, a small wooden stage, and hundreds of young women waiting silently. When Maya stepped onto the stage, the entire room held its breath, not because they recognized her as the woman shaking the world, but because they felt something in her, the stillness, the steadiness, the resilience of someone who had walked through fire and refused to let it consume her. Maya looked at them one face at a time, and for a brief moment she saw her younger self, the girl sitting under a flickering neon light, hoping one day for a chance. "I used to believe," Maya began, her voice warm and slow, "that power meant controlling every door." The room fell utterly silent. "But I learned that true power is when you can open doors for others." Eyes glistened. A young woman covered her mouth to hold in a sob. "The Rose Initiative is not about revenge," Maya continued, "but about redistributing opportunity. about turning what once hurt us into the foundation that lifts the next person higher. The applause that followed was not explosive like fireworks, but steady, strong like the heartbeat of a community coming back to life. After the ceremony, Maya stayed speaking with each person, reading every proposal, listening to every story. She took no photos, recorded nothing, needed no witnesses, but Lauren, watching from the back, understood something the world would soon understand as well. Maya Carter had not merely collapsed a corporation. She was building a generation, and that not the $5 billion, not the downfall of the Whitmore family, not the headlines would be the aftershock echoing for decades. Meanwhile, in the Hamptons, the sea wind swept through the empty estate, carrying away the remnants of a once lavish empire that believed itself immortal. An old world had ended. A new one was rising, built from the very place they once tried to push Maya out of. But Maya did not walk out. She walked in and opened the door for everyone who had never been allowed to touch it. And this was only the beginning. That night, inside the modest hall of the community center in Chicago, the warm amber lights fell across Maya's face like a quiet halo. Not the halo of a victor, but of someone laying the first bricks for roads no one had dared to build. When the microphone was handed to her, the room descended into a silence filled with expectation, a silence not born of fear, but of reverence for the woman who had shifted the balance of power in a way the world never saw coming. Maya stood there with no security guards, no grand stage, no LED walls, only herself and the people looking up at her with eyes full of belief. I used to think Maya said her voice, low and gentle like the final notes of a piano at the end of a performance, that power was something you had to hold, tightly keep high, keep distant, so no one could reach it. A breath settled in the room. But then I learned, power is not meant to be locked away in a vault. It is meant to be shared, passed on, used to lift others so they can stand tall. Soft gasps rippled through the audience like tight strings, finally eased. The Rose Initiative, she continued, was not created for revenge. It was created for transformation, because what once wounded us can become the very thing that builds a new world. She looked toward the rows of young women, seated close together, hands gripping folders full of dreams. Silence can be a form of response, Maya said, her eyes shimmering, not with emotion, but with the clarity of someone who understood the true nature of power. But action is what changes history. And in that moment, everyone knew Maya was not speaking only about herself. She was speaking about them and about every generation that would follow. Maya ended with a voice soft as morning light. This is not my rise. This is yours. I only opened the door, and the room erupted into the longest applause it had ever known. 1 year after the Whitmore Empire collapsed in silence, and the Rose Initiative rose like a new current of light. The city of New York looked unchanged on the surface. The towers still stood. The avenues still pulsed with life. But the spirit of the city was entirely different, as if someone had changed the filter through which the world was seen. Inside the Helix House of Innovation, a building that had once been the Whitmore family's lavish residence, the sound of footsteps now belonged to young women arriving for their first mentoring session, their eyes glowing with hope. Maya walked through the room, lightly touching the crystal edges of the chandelier that had once witnessed humiliation, then downfall, and now rebirth. She did not feel pride. She felt completion. because what she wanted was never the destruction of a family, but the opening of new paths for those who had never been given a chance. One late afternoon, Lauren brought Maya a letter. No elegant seal, no recognizable signature, only the shaky handwriting of a young girl. "Thank you," the letter read. "I used to clean at big events where no one ever looked at me. But that night, when you stood silent in front of them, I saw hope. The Rose Initiative helped me get into college. I promise I will help other girls the way you helped me." When Maya finished reading, she closed her eyes, letting the sounds of the city blend with her breath. Not because she was overwhelmed, but because she understood this was the real power. The power that did not need spotlights, did not need applause, only continuity. That evening, Maya stood on the balcony, watching the snow fall, just like the night she signed the order to terminate. But this time, the snow did not fall like a farewell, but like a promise. She whispered, "Mama, we really have finished cleaning the house." And on the streets below, small roses projects, dreams people were beginning to bloom. An old empire had fallen, a new generation had risen, and Maya Carter simply smiled, knowing that when power is placed in the right hands, it does not end a story. It begins a legacy. From the perspective of an expert in governance and systemic ethics, Maya Carter's journey reveals an undeniable truth. Power only carries meaning when it creates opportunity, not when it builds walls. Her decision, which to some might appear cold, was never meant to bring anyone down, but to restore balance for those who had never been allowed to stand on level ground. And it was that stillness, not the noise, that redefined the standards of justice in a new era. If this story resonates with you, please like and subscribe to continue following the journeys that reshape systems through courage and compassion. Before you leave the video, comment a short phrase, no more than 3 words, to remember today's message: grant opportunity.